Earlier this year, I convened the National Roundtable on Online Dating Safety in response to concerning research about abuse or harassment occurring over online dating platforms. The Roundtable brought together advocacy groups, state governments, victim survivors, law enforcement and dating sites, major global platforms including Bumble and Match Group. This was the first time some of these dating apps had engaged with the government. Even before the event took place, platforms started to make announcements about new safety features. However, following an information request I issued to industry in March, it was evident there were still gaps in safety policy and processes. That's why, in September, I formally requested dating platforms operating in Australia to develop a new voluntary industry code to better protect Australian users. Dating industry representatives met earlier this week to progress this work, with support from my department, and I look forward to an update on next steps. The truth is, the dating apps are offering a hugely popular service. It's now the most common way to meet someone in Australia, but Australians need to be able to do so safely. I have been clear that the code is to be in place by the middle of next year, and industry knows it must improve the safety of Australians or we will regulate them. This setting of clear expectations and driving transparency around industry's actions is a fundamental component of Australia's online safety approach. The Basic Online Safety Expectations Determination sets out the government's core expectations for the online industry and provides a clear message about our priorities and the steps industry can take to address them. The E-Safety Commissioner can require online service providers to report on how they are meeting any or all of the expectations. Since last August, E-Safety has issued 3 rounds of reporting notices to 12 companies covering 27 different services, shining new light on what they are doing to counter child exploitation and abuse and hateful content. Since issuing these notices, we have seen some of our most popular platforms introduce new safety policies to address this horrific material. This demonstrates the efficacy of the framework in putting pressure on industry to do more of their own accord. The information received through these reports also gives government a critical evidence base about the need for further reforms. But it's clear there is more industry can do on harms not explicitly set out in the current expectations. That's why today I announced that the Albanese government will commence consultation to strengthen Australia's basic online safety expectations, to address gaps, emerging harms, and further clarify the government's expectations of industry. Under the proposed changes, services using generative AI would explicitly be expected to proactively minimise the extent to which AI can be used to produce unlawful and harmful material. We are also proposing a new expectation that industry consider the best interests of children in the design and operation of their services. This could include implementing appropriate age assurance mechanisms and technologies to prevent children from accessing age-inappropriate material. The government received the E-Safety Commissioner's age verification roadmap earlier this year. The roadmap noted that the age assurance industry and associated technologies are new and still evolving and come with privacy, security and implementation risks. However, it is also clear that some age assurance technologies and complementary measures are being deployed effectively across commercial platforms to prevent a range of harms to children. We want to see industry continue to develop and invest further in these technologies. Consultation on the proposed amendments commences today, and I invite submissions before the 16th of February 2024. I also want to touch on another proposed reform in my portfolio that addresses a gap in our existing regulatory framework: the Exposure Draft Bill to tackle seriously harmful misinformation and disinformation on digital platforms. The overwhelming majority of Australians are concerned about misinformation. Nearly 70%, according to the Digital News report by the University of Canberra. The government's draft bill, which was released for public consultation, would empower the ACMA to hold digital platforms to account with new information gathering, record keeping, code registration and standard making powers. This would improve transparency about the decisions platforms already make about harmful content on their services. Digital platforms are not passive. Social media companies manage content on their services every single day. Australians deserve to know more about what content is flagged, demoted or taken down. This is about better understanding the systems and processes industry have in place. Spread online at speed and scale, both misinformation and disinformation can cause serious harm, sow divisions within the community, undermine trust and threaten public health and safety. Indeed, the potential for the spread of AI-generated mis and disinformation makes taking action even more pressing. The risks here were well understood by my predecessor, Paul Fletcher, who announced that his government would legislate to give the regulator new information gathering and enforcement powers in this area. We supported him at the time and remain committed to the policy, and for good reason. We are talking about harmful misinformation spread during a global pandemic that claimed millions of lives, about cancer misinformation that prevents a patient from seeing their doctor during the critical time when recovery is still possible, and disinformation spread by bad actors who want to undermine our democracy. It was recently reported the Chief of the Defence Force said disinformation operations have the potential to fracture and fragment entire societies. And as former ACCC Chair Rod Sims wrote recently, doing nothing in this area would represent an abrogation of responsibility by government. I thank stakeholders for the feedback provided during consultation. We are working through those submissions in earnest, and in particular, the feedback on definitions and exemptions, and expect to make some changes to the draft bill before it is introduced to the Parliament next year. A solid evidence base is important to inform government's approach to addressing online harms, particularly for those who are most vulnerable. In the last 12 months, I have introduced several gambling harm minimisation measures, including launching BetStop, the National Self-Exclusion Register, agreeing new mandatory minimum classifications for games with gambling-like features, and introducing legislation to ban the use of credit cards for online wagering. On BetStop, since its launch less than 3 months ago, nearly 13,000 Australians have already self-excluded from online wagering. Over half of those who've registered are between the ages of 18 and 30, and 40% have elected to self-exclude for a lifetime. This is critical protection when it comes to helping people stay safe from gambling-related harm. This is in addition to the government's work to implement consistent gambling messaging, wagering staff training and mandatory customer pre-verification. But more needs to be done. That's why in September last year, we referred an inquiry into online gambling harm and its impacts to a House committee which has now made 31 recommendations, which are informing the government's consideration of further gambling reforms. In relation to gambling advertising, I am, like many Australians, concerned about the extent and the impact of gambling ads. I've been working with my department to understand how we can practically implement reforms and engaging with a wide range of stakeholders: media, digital platforms, sporting codes and harm reduction advocates. We all know that the online gambling industry has grown and changed in recent years, and that some sporting codes now rely heavily on online gambling revenue. But my priority is clear. It is harm reduction. We haven't made any final decisions yet, but I appreciate the constructive input from all stakeholders as we consider next steps. I, along with the Minister for Social Services, look forward to outlining our agenda to further address gambling harms. As we near the end of my address, I want to reflect on a point I made earlier. New harms have emerged and some known harms have intensified. We need to ensure our legislative framework does more than just play catch-up and incentivises platforms to have protections built in. While the Online Safety Act provides protections for individuals who have been targeted by seriously harmful online abuse, there is no mechanism to address harmful abuse directed at communities on the basis of their religion or their ethnicity. There is deep concern across the community about the way hateful language spreads online, including recent reporting about the rise in anti-Semitic and Islamophobic rhetoric. Over the past 2 years, it's also become harder to distinguish between AI-generated images and genuine ones. And while this technology has incredible potential as a positive tool, it has also been used to create images designed to humiliate, embarrass, or even abuse others. Australia needs our legislative framework to be strong, but also flexible enough to respond to an ever-evolving space. Earlier this year, I said I would bring forward the statutory review of the Online Safety Act by a year. And today, I'm pleased to announce that I have appointed Ms Delia Rickard, PSM, to lead a comprehensive review of the Online Safety Act, with public consultation to commence next year. Ms Rickard has extensive experience in regulating consumer harms and is highly regarded for her efforts to promote a safer online environment through regulating scams. As the Deputy Chair of the ACCC for more than 10 years, she witnessed firsthand the changing digital landscape and how the vectors for harm have become increasingly sophisticated. The review will be broad-ranging and include consideration of the overarching policy objectives of the Act. It will look at the effectiveness of the complaint schemes, the operation of the regulatory tools, and identify gaps in the legislation. The review will consider whether regulatory approaches being adopted internationally, including the duty of care approach that is progressing in the UK, should be adopted in the Australian context. I welcome the involvement of all interested parties as Ms Rickard undertakes this work. Back in the 1970s, when I was immersing myself in news and content the analogue way, my parents didn't worry so much because they knew and understood what I was looking at. Today, our children get online and parents and legislators are rightly concerned because we know that the content kids can access and the connections they can make through games, video sites and social networks are vast and too often unchecked. The way governments and regulators go about keeping citizens safe from online harms cannot be set and forget. The Albanese government is committed to realising improvements to communications to make Australians' lives better and expand opportunity, supporting people to connect, work flexibly, be entertained, transact, do business, learn and play safely. It must be an ongoing, careful exercise delivered together with industry, in step with changes in technology and in partnership with the health practitioners, experts, parents and communities. In the era of the digital giants, it is more important than ever that Australia asserts its values and the community standards we expect online, that we reaffirm our shared responsibility to protect citizens and consumers. That way, we can fully realise the benefits of the digital world. Thank you.